Can you guys hear me? Yes. Hello. Yeah. This one's a bit louder. This one's this one's all right.
Oh, sorry. Go
No
for it.
worries. Okay. So yes. So let's put a mic over here so you guys can just turn it on when you need.
It was good.
Hello. 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 Sounds good. Yeah. Let's have. Hello, everybody. Okay, so my name is Trent Charles, and I am the president of Malmo Plains Community League. Thank you for everybody for coming, and especially the Edmonton Police. Kind of feels like there's more of you guys than us, but I'm quite excited for that. So one of the main concerns that residents have brought up to me as president is community safety. That's been the number one issue that residents have brought forward as a complaint. And that's one of the issues I'm trying to work to come up with solutions for, talking with the different groups, organizations involved and stuff like that. So let's start with some introductions. Maybe we get everybody to introduce themselves because most of the people are new for me. We'll start with Michael Jans. I think I'll turn it on.
Good afternoon, my name is Michael Jan, City Councilor, Ward Papastale. City Councilor, Ward Papastale. Okay, this one works.
Keith Scott, I'm the Director for Complaints and Investigations with the City of Edmonton, so I oversee non-uniform bylaw officers that deal with snow and ice, nuisance properties, graffiti. I also have parking enforcement on my portfolio, and I also have Capital City Cleanup.
Good afternoon. My name is Troy Cotarelli. I'm the Operations Manager for the Park Ranger Peace Officer Program. In my portfolio, we have the Marine Unit, the General Duty Response, Wildlife, and Homeless Encampment Response.
I'm Fred Matrum, Acting Manager for Transit Peace Officers. We oversee all the transit peace officers, the COT teams, and TCAT.
Good afternoon. My name is Darren Bear. I'm one of the 3 sergeants for the TRAX team, which is the Transit and Community Safety teams. Yeah.
And good afternoon, Trevor Hermans. I'm the superintendent in charge of South Division. I'm very pleased to be here, and I've chatted with a few of already. I really enjoyed the community meetings and putting a face to a name, and yourself for mine. I'm in charge of two divisions, so southeast and southwest branches. Southwest branch encompasses this area. I dragged my police people here with me today with, no, I'm just kidding, but Inspector Trevor Bahachuk is my second in command of Southwest, and he just started this week, so he's kind of sitting, so I made sure he came this week to get to know you folks as well. He just started a week into it. Patrol resources are our primary response, and we're beat program as well. So, and we're, like I said, the guys and gals that you see drive around in the cars, those are our folks.
Hi folks, my name's Carrie Ellinger. I'm the Community Safety Liaison with the Neighborhood Empowerment Team. I am assigned to Southwest Branch, right? Southwest Branch. So the neighborhoods around here fall under my area of responsibility.
Hi everyone, nice to be here today. My name is Megan Chenard. I'm a Senior Project Manager with the City of Edmonton on the Transit Safety File.
Hi, my name is Katie Warner and I work for the Community Outreach Transit Team, and I service anywhere in Edmonton that transit goes.
Okay, so I want to first go over just kind of what I've felt from residents and kind of my experiences and perspectives and stuff like that to kind of just share that in a kind of a more coherent form. So it seems that it's kind of been more recently that the crime has been an uptick. It wasn't at the beginning of COVID, it seemed to be about halfway through COVID, and it seems mostly related to the LRT. Most of the complaints I get are from residents that directly back onto the LRT, kind of are on the east side of Malmo in general. I personally live on the west end of Malmo, kind of like as far as it goes, and there's not a whole lot of issues over there. We had a bike stolen, but I mean, we were kind of silly with that. We just had it in the backyard sitting open. And yeah, even just, we sent out an email like last week, and we had one of the residents who unsubscribed from it because they actually moved out of the community because of the safety issues, that they just didn't want to be here anymore. And to me, that's one of the biggest concerns I see for Malmo, particularly the east side of Malmo, is that more and more people are not wanting to live in this area because of the drugs, the homelessness, and things like that. Like even just at this meeting, we had a homeless person that was sleeping outside of the church here. And I understand that these are very complex issues, and I can't imagine how I live myself as a homeless person. Like I lose internet for 5 minutes and I lose my mind. But yeah, so residents are very concerned, and a lot of residents, one, don't feel safe taking the LRT. They've been, I've had 2 residents in particular that have been burglarized and injured on the way back from the LRT just in the last few months. We've had multiple break-ins into the hall, which was the first time that's ever happened. So yeah, it just seems like there's a lot of issues going on, and just hoping to open up the lines of communication that we can start to figure out what can be done. One of the things that residents had brought up is that previously we had a constable, Constable Klein, who I think was specifically targeted for our neighborhood, and she would actually park out just behind us in the back alley at the LRT. And a lot of residents brought up that they felt very safe when they were getting off the LRT, that they walk into the back alley and there she is. They could text her, they could call her, and she'd kind of go above and beyond the call of duty to try and do the best she could for the community. So that was one of the things that residents had talked about with great appreciation and something that they'd like to see back. And another main topic is the LRT, of just who's going on to the LRT. It seems that there was a change during COVID, kind of letting anybody take shelter in the LRT, ride the LRT with kind of no repercussions. And so at least 30% of the residents I talked to no longer ride the LRT, or will actually drive over to Southgate and get onto the LRT from the Southgate side rather than actually walk through the 111th Street entrance. So yeah, that's kind of my summary of what I'm seeing. And I want to start off with Michael Jans and kind of hear his perspective on City Council, and yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Trent, and a big thank you to Trent for helping organize this event today. So yeah, and thanks to all of you for taking the time on a Saturday to come here. I want to begin by saying we all deserve to feel safe, whether we're in our home, whether we're in our backyard, whether we're on the train. We all deserve to have a good night's sleep without worrying about crime, break-and-enters. We all deserve to go to the work or go and do our chores and our errands during the day without worrying about fires that we're going to come home to, trees or a neighboring home or a shed or a green space catching light. the fact that these concerns have worsened so much across not just Malmo, but Lendrum, Pleasant View, Allendale, the whole core of our city, all the way into the ravine and the river valley and Mill Creek, for some of you who talked to me about going out on walks, that's unacceptable. And I'm really buoyed over the last 2 years on the cross-sector collaboration that I've seen coming together. Also, is anyone from the fire department here today? No, okay, but a shout out to them as well too, that they've been really coming together on some of the problem properties and some of the other encampments and issues here. We know these are big, thorny issues. We know they're complex. We know that if they were easy, we would have already solved the problem and sold the solution to every other city in North America wrestling with them. But we also know that that these pieces have multifaceted solutions, and the fact that we're coming together and chipping away at it and working on it today, I think is really powerful. So yeah, I just wanted to again thank the organizer and thank the team for bringing this together, and I really look forward to hearing the conversation. And for those of you, if for whatever reason you have to leave early, I wanted to let you know this conversation will be continuing at City Council on December 12th. We have our next transit safety update. We get these every 2 months. We get an update, and it's provided by the team here. It's tripartite. It's police, it's transit safety, it's everybody, and they're really good presentations. You can go back and watch the last video, and you can see the improvements that have been made and the different approaches. They've got the Southgate Mall team, the transit peace officer team, the social outreach team, everybody, and they actually took us on a walkabout. We just did a meeting at Southgate Station. Just feels like it was before the snow fell. So what is that? A month ago? Yeah. But it was really impressive just to see the collaboration that's coming together. So I don't deny there's issues, not making excuses for them. We're working on them. We'll continue to work on them, and we'll keep moving ahead. So thank you.
So next I want to pass it over to Carrie. She's our neighborhood empowerment officer, and she's been working hard, planning this with Julie. So I'm very grateful. Without them, this wouldn't been able to make happen. And I also want to kind of let her talk about the different initiatives. So she's working on the Southgate grant. So we've gotten $300,000 to kind of try to clean up the Southgate transit station. So she's been kind of organizing that. And then she's also been working in the neighborhood. So we'd recorded our August safety meeting, and two of the main things that kind of been brought up was having lights on the garages, as well as kind of street numbers for the garages, because I did a 2:30 walk during the White Mud area, and you just can't tell. It's very claustrophobic, but there was one house that had a very bright motion sensor light, and at first I was like, whoa, what's going on here? But then I realized, I was like, oh, I actually really like this. It would be nice that if there was motion sensor lights along this whole way, that I could see if there was other people walking towards me and kind of have a better grasp of what kind of situation I'm in. Do I need to turn around, stuff like that. So yeah, I'll pass it over to Carrie.
Thanks, Trent. So yeah, the project that Trent was referring to was out of the last Malmo community safety meeting. We heard from some residents that the back alleys are a particular area of concern. So since that meeting, that was mid-September, I think, August. We have distributed 50 solar-powered motion lights throughout Malmo into back alleys. So just really trying to do something specific to brighten up those spaces for folks where we heard that there was a particular area of concern. So the other piece of work that I'm working on in this area, like Trent mentioned, is the Southgate portion of the Alberta Transit Safety and Cleanup Grant. So that's a grant through the provincial government that gave the City of Edmonton $5 million to work on some specific cleanup projects around transit. So what we're working on at Southgate is particularly focused on what's called crime prevention through environmental design. So there's been a number of assessments and reports that have been done in that space of structural and physical ways that we can enhance safety in that space. So we're using that grant money to implement some of those recommendations. So some of the core things that we're working on for that project are pruning the shrubs that are along 111th Street. We're taking out about 50% of the shrubbery material that's in there to really improve some sight lines. We're working on better lighting along that walking path as well, and better lighting throughout Southgate Transit Centre. We are doing some locking enhancements to the doors for after hours when they're locked up to prevent doors being pried open. We're installing better cameras and better lighting in all of the elevators, because those are an area of concern. And then one of the sort of activation, positive animation projects that we're working on is we're going to be installing a mural in the west node, the stairwell that's on the west side of 111th Street that leads up to the pedway. We're working on a mural project in that space to sort of brighten it up, prevent some graffiti, do a bit of more positive stuff into that space. So there is posters throughout the hallways with some initial design concepts for that mural right now. So if you want to take a look at those, let me know your preference, which way you'd like to go with that mural. We're trying to get as much feedback as we can on that. And then I think maybe I'll turn it over to Megan to talk a little more in detail about the grant more broadly, if that makes sense.
Thanks so much, Carrie. You stole all of the things I was going to say. So thanks so much, though. You're doing some amazing work here in the community. And just to reiterate what you were saying, the province in the spring granted the City of Edmonton a $5 million grant for transit security, safety, and cleanup. And one of those projects is the work that we are doing at Southgate. So it's really exciting to see some of these initiatives move forward. To give you a little taster of some of the other things that are happening granted across the system, as Carrie mentioned, we are working on what's called door hardening. So we have ordered and installed what are called astragals, and those are actually anti-tampering and break-in hardware that we have on our doors. So we're installing those across the system to hopefully decrease vandalism as well as break-ins after hours. We're also installing over 40 new security cameras across all of the system stations. So that's something that we're really excited for. And we're also doing some beautification projects. And so the mural at Southgate is one of those. But we're also looking at doing some activations downtown. So we have a few different projects, and you can definitely hear some more about that on the City of Edmonton's website. But those are definitely system-wide, and we know that transit is really a microcosm of what is happening in the broader community. So we're really hoping that by doing what we can within the transit system, that filters out into the community as well. And just to reiterate what Councillor Jan said at the start, everyone deserves to feel safe on transit. So I just want to say today that I'm here, I hear you. We hear you, and definitely appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation.
Who do you think should talk next?
Did you guys bring stats or any of that?
Yeah, I'm not sure what they want to hear, so I brought stats or have some ideas for things. So just conversation for me, I guess, just in kind of in part and parcel to what you said. You brought up a whole bunch of different things, but the beauty of this, though, is it takes a community to be safe, all of us. We're all just one part of it. And I realize, especially from our standpoint, we're one part of the safety. Yeah, important part as well as everyone else here is, but a real important part. For me, you brought up two things. You talked about Corrine. You talked about Corrine Klein, and she was a big part of this, and she can't be replaced, of course, and God bless her for where she is. But people like that are few and far between. I like to think we all have that real community-based stuff, because I think the important thing, what we have, and I was, for years, I walked a beat in the North End, and a big part of how I grew up in my service is being part of the community. And I think part of that has been lost over the last few years, especially with COVID. And I think I think everybody's kind of feeling that, and no different in my service as well. I think it's up to us, and I'd look at leadership within my service, especially in our branches, bring that sense of community back to my members that are patrolling, because our job, we're really response. Our whole process, all my members, we're patrol response and I'm on calls, emergent calls and whatnot. I brought my beat sergeant, Mike Elliott, here's in charge of the beats on Strathcona area, specifically for there, but that's just one area of the city. And I look at my guys and gals that are out there every day taking calls. Well, they're responding to calls, and there's never not a call on the board. And there's multiple all the time. And the city's grown, the population has grown, the demand has grown, especially for patrol members. And sometimes I think they don't think they can ever get caught up. And I'm not making an excuse, but I don't think they can get caught up sometimes. And I feel for it, but what suffers is our time in the community. That's what suffers, especially for our patrol members. Ideally, I'd love them to be able to spend more time in the communities, because I tell you what, for me, that's how I grew up. It's super important to me, and it's made me who I am as a police officer. It made me care about the people in my community. I grew up in a time when they had the community stations, and in the community stations, that's where I spent most of my time as a young copper. And I got to know the people in there. I still really have a lot of good memories from that first community.
Could you articulate what a community station
So I think everyone's Fairway Station, maybe people have had this in the community before. It's had community stations built, or small police stations built right within the communities, would be manned by somebody would be an officer in the front, and people could respond from the community to there, almost like your walk-in station, but in a small community kind of a setting, rather than the big stations that we have now. Yeah, we don't have those anymore, of course, for a variety of different reasons. A lot of it's budget, a lot of it's consolidating a lot of the areas that we have, and it all comes down to funding and staffing, and that's a big thing for us as a police service. We've ramped up or amped up our recruiting. We used to have classes. I was in training for about almost 4 years, and we'd run 3 classes of 32 a year, so about 96 people a year, and come in as recruits. So we build our service, but we can't keep up anymore because I have gray hair now, and people of my age are leaving, and we can't keep up to the demand. So we have classes of 50 that have just started now to try and keep up to the demand, and that's just for patrol resources. And when we get patrol resources, that's when we can take people out of patrol, when we replace them with somebody, a more senior person, and they can go do some specialized work for us. So we just feel like we're just treading water when it comes to that. I think everyone feels it in every agency. I have a lot of people that I know right across the country, and we're not unique to our problems, especially with recruiting, with retention, and with our community issues, encampments, all that. It's across the country. And blame it whatever you want. It's so much has changed since COVID, and even the officers, and our chief made a really interesting comment this week, and it kind of really made me think, because I was part of that training when we were hiring people during COVID. And when we were training our people during COVID, they weren't having the personal touch because we weren't allowing them, because no one could have that personal touch. So they're getting trained in a police car making phone calls to people. So not having that personal touch. And it was an interesting comment that I didn't really tweak on me until he mentioned it this week, how important we almost have to retrain some of our new folks, not all of them, but the important thing is to spend time with a good person when you have time to spend with them. And spend time in your community. Kind of my focus, and I know Trevor's brand new, so I'm going to kind of throw it on him as he rolls in here, but part of my focus, I want to try and get that more of a community involvement with my patrol members if I can. It all goes down to calls for service, but a little more intentional in the work that they do, a little more intentional, focused enforcement. And that comes with a whole variety from analytics to doing things, to being in the right place at the right time, and we're working on that. And that's a big part of my goals next year, is it's keeping it simple. Being a little bit smarter in the work we do, being a little more intentional in our proactive work, and just maybe driving some of that, even crime or violence or all that stuff down. And I know in all the areas, and when you look at the stats and you look at that community safety, or I think it's community safety crime map, I believe that's what it's called, that everyone can access, gives you the last 180 days. If you look right across the city, property crime, or something involving property crime is right at the top, and each of the districts around here is no different. Probably your number one thing, majority of it involves some type of property crime or disorder. And that's for a variety of different reasons. And I love to hear talking about crime prevention, because I know when I walked a beat, that was a big part of what I would preach to, crime prevention through environmental design. I was instructor of that for a while, and I totally believe in that. Crime prevention, community involvement that's the only way we can solve this together. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to ask some questions. If you want me to get more specific on things, I'm happy to talk about, but I do like to talk, and I can talk all day, but I enjoy meeting people and hearing what people have to say.
Sure. So do we have paper questions, or do we mostly do live questions? I'm not sure how that worked out. Yeah. So do we want to I can go down there and have one microphone, kind of maintain that, and then we have one up there. Okay. So get somebody to hold this one.
Test?
That will work.
Yep.
Hello. So anybody wants to have a question, I'll just get you to come up. Actually, I can walk around too.
No, I don't sing. My name's Susan Field, and I run the Community Connection and Crime Prevention Program in Aspen and Westbrook. We've run it since 2008, and our whole focus is on preventing crimes of opportunity. The previous crime map, the neighborhood crime map, was great because it would tell us what those crimes of opportunity are. The new version does not do that. Is there a way for us to be able to separate the crimes of opportunity against the violent crimes? For the rest of you, the reason that's important for us is our program can only address how to prevent crimes of opportunity, like thefts, but we can't prevent violent crimes. So we have to know what those crimes are, and for example, theft from auto is no longer a category. So that's the problem. So I'm not too sure if the theft is, what kind of property theft it is, right? And there is a difference when you're trying to teach your neighborhood what they need to lock up, right? You know, it's great to have a man door that somebody walked into, but the other thing is we have discovered that a lot of our theft from autos are from our young people who leave their bags in the car, but that's also their life savings. It's their laptop. It's their Ray-Ban sunglasses that cost them $1 kajillion. But as a kid, that's a big deal, right? So to have a little bit more information on crimes of opportunity would be great. The other thing is, sure.
You know, I don't have the exact answer, so I'm hoping, I don't know, Trev, maybe you know that a little bit better, but you're right. When I looked at it, can you hear me? If I'm talking? Okay, Patricia, please, yeah, because I'm not 100% certain.
Sorry, now that our new niche system is working, we're going to be able to update all of our community portals, and we can talk obviously about the type of data we'll convey, but the old portals were not the best. We'll be looking at
They were super limited, but they were more helpful to the community.
yeah, no,
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
We're having a brand new RMS system, so management system of all our records, and a lot more ingestion of the data that's going to come out. And I'm very hopeful that hopefully you'll get that. But you're right. So you'll say 51% of your time is property crime or whatever it is.
Exactly.
It could be theft from autos. It could be mischief to autos. It could be beanies. It could be stuff that relates directly to property, and you can't break it down. My analyst could break it down specifically for me if I'm asked. It takes a bit to get that, but you're right, you're not.
So the reason it's important in mature neighborhoods is we have lots of seniors, and when they hear that there was a B&E, immediately they get scared and think that it's a break into their house, when really it was somebody's shed or garage or car. And there's a huge difference to safety when it comes to somebody who goes through my backyard between midnight and dawn hunting for stuff that they want to pick up and somebody who is a home invader. And so we want to make sure that the neighborhood has perspective. Okay, and then the only other thing is to the city. When you're designing shrubbery, why are you designing shrubbery? Why are we not putting trees up? Honestly, microclover is better than shrubs. In our neighborhood, we're encouraging people to put in trees that are going to last, you know, decades, as opposed to put in shrubs where people can hide behind them. It's just a design thing, and it's not, you know, it's not for me to state. But I'm thinking that if we do it from the design standpoint, then we're not wasting money cleaning all the time. We can put those funds into something else. But I could stand here for a minute.
And Trevor, if you can use the mic, I think not for the people here, but for the YouTube recording, I think that's kind of it's recording through there, so that'd be good. And also, I did want to kind of mention that shrub comment. I did have one of my residents on 51st Ave say that he had a shrub that was like right beside his house or in front of his house, and his house got broken in like 3 times. He removed that shrub, never happened again. So just something to keep in mind.
I just want to quickly add to that there is, as I mentioned before, CEPTED, there is CEPTED guidelines on how low shrubs should be to the ground, and then how tall up trees should be pruned from the ground to help avoid those hiding spots. And we do have a really great booklet over here that'll walk you step by step through your property of all of the CEPTED principles. So please feel free to grab stuff on your way out that can help you navigate all that stuff too. And if we can connect after too, that'd be great.
And what's your name?
My name's Shannon. We formerly owned property in Malmo and had our sons and our nephews living just along the road on 111th Street, and we left we left the property because of multiple acts of arson and a sense that these children that were like the focus of our lives were going to be burned alive one night. And my entire family lives in the surrounding area. My mother lives in Greenfield. I live right nearby. And what the LRT has meant in recent years to these communities is difficult to see and to accept. For people who've seen me and heard me say this before, it's probably old news, but I'd like to share it as briefly as possible so people can understand the perspective that I bring. I hear a lot of people that are worried about their purses and their sunglasses and the material possessions in their yard, and I'm not here to dishonor that, and I'm not here to say that that is not important. People have a right to their belongings and to the things that they earn. But in 1991, my pastor's daughter was raped and murdered in the LRT, and that was at a time when nobody would have imagined that something like that would have happened. I was much younger at the time. I took the LRT all the time, and I came from a very sheltering, protective home. It would be unthinkable to me now that I would allow my daughters to be on the LRT late at night. And I'm not worried when I'm on the LRT that myself or another woman or another man that's on the LRT is going to have their purse stolen or have someone bug them for money. I believe it is a matter of time before a woman is raped and sodomized on the LRT, and I believe it is a matter of time before someone is physically assaulted to the point that they are permanently disabled or killed on the LRT. I go on the LRT, I see gang members, I see people that are involved, I see people that are carrying weapons, and I see the fact that the city has responded to that by having an abundance of people that are there to monitor and report and not to take action. And I'm not saying they should take action. That's not their role, that's not their position. I'm not looking for anyone to be unsafe, but I think that we have to revisit the staffing supports that we're providing, and there needs to be more people that can actually action out the issue of people that are there that, you know, have weapons or not behaving appropriately. And I am disheartened at the lack of attention that is guessing. I would also like to say, and I may be the only person that says it because I kind of don't care if I hurt people's feelings, but I can tell you it is something I've heard within the community. You know, there are people here that said, hey, we're going to get rolled in the West Southgate LRT. That little station, you walk in there, there's a person around the corner, and you come around, and sometimes it's just someone smoking pot, and someone they're about to steal from you. And it's been suggested that there's mirrors in there so that when you go in, that you can see everything. And we were told that's too expensive, and now people want us to vote on a mural. Who cares about the mural? It's not important. I don't need to be raped and sodomized under a pretty picture. Nobody needs to be raped, sodomized, or robbed under a beautiful painting. It doesn't make the experience better. Amen. We need to put our money into things that make us be safer. And that mirrors was a brilliant suggestion. You know, every morning where I go to coffee, there's police officers. I stand behind them. They all turn around. It's instinctive that you want to know who's behind you. Instinctive. When I'm in there, my instinct is I want to know who's in every corner because I don't assume there's kindness in every corner. And so I'm just really don't feel at all listened to or at all heard from when people are told that people are worried about being raped, murdered, sodomized, and we're like, hey, which painting's the best? I don't think that really reflects the kind of messaging that people have been giving for 2 or 3 years. Nobody cares about the painting. No one cares about the mural. People want to leave that station without stitches, without being raped, without being beaten, and with the funds they came into. And that is such an insult to the taxpayers and such an insult to the men and women that take the transit every day. I go on the transit. I'm Indigenous, I'm light-skinned. That's not something that everybody can see, but my family is Indigenous. We've had people say hateful things. I've seen people say things to women that are in hijabs. I have seen all kinds of crazy things happen on the LRT. And do I feel safe? No. But I, as an adult, have the right to make that decision. My sons and my daughters will never take it. Will never happen. That will not be their story. And so I just feel really disillusioned. And I just feel really disillusioned with what is being paid attention to. And I think that the city has to re-examine the level of support that they offer to the police in terms of having the number of bodies that are necessary. And I think that the police are disadvantaged from being able to respond. And I think that the LRT needs more people that can action things and not people that are there to take notes or to tell me that they're observing and they're reporting back. We need more people with boots on the ground. Because a lot of the people that are compromised by intellectual disabilities, mental health problems, drug problems, homelessness, they see a city employee standing there while they're behaving horrendously. And they're not like, well, that person probably doesn't have the authority. They're probably, they're not, they don't have the credentials of a peace officer or a police officer. It's all the same to them. And so they're like, well, I can do this because they're standing there not doing anything. They don't realize that that person is being, that would be out of scope for their position. They're not thinking of that. And the last thing I'll say, I had a lot of opportunities through a variety of different reasons to interact and experience the officer, Karine, who had her time here. And she's really missed by the community, and I really feel for your station and what that loss must have been like for your station, because she was very special to us.
Thank you for sharing. I also want to add a quick point that one of my residents actually commented or emailed me this morning about the elevator issue as well, and she talked about that the current mirrors don't work for her just because she's visually impaired, like she just can't see the small mirrors, and that's actually where she was one of the people that was assaulted there and had to go to the hospital for stitches and stuff like that. So that is.
I will just add that I didn't cover it in my overview of what we are doing under that grant, but mirrors in those stairwells is on the list. So we are adding larger convex mirrors in all of the corners in the stairwells at Southgate to make it more easily visible around the corners so you can see who is there, who is coming down or up around the corners. So that is something that is happening. And all the work on that grant is due by the end of March of next year. So that will be coming in the next, what are we at, 4 or 5 months now.
And one of the things I want to bring up too is that this isn't necessarily Carrie's particular initiative. She's basically been tasked with bringing it to bear. But my understanding is a part of that grant application that was submitted to the province is part of the activation and adding art. So I am of the same perspective, but I don't want to necessarily push undue blame on people as well. Did anybody else want to comment or talk about it? Okay.
I guess where to begin, but when you talk about the boots on the ground piece there, sorry, I didn't catch your first name.
Shannon.
Hi, Shannon. My teams were basically, I'll start kind of with a brief overview of what we do. I'm the boots on the ground component of this, so I'm in charge of a team of 1 sergeant and then 6 constables. And Amanda Ross, who's in the audience over there, is also going to be starting soon. And we have a 3rd team too. So we're called Tracks. We have this collaborative approach to all this. So I hear you. I understand what you're saying. Your perception is your reality 100%. And we're not just transit terminal itself. I'm up and down the line all day long with my people. We do 2 days, 2 nights, and we have 4 off. So we roughly work 6 in the morning till about 5 at night, and then we switch to our night shift. And we do that from about 4 to about 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. So the things that you're talking about definitely resonate with us. The line is large. We're getting this online right now. The superintendent and the inspector, they're more of the reactive approach to the patrol. We're more of the proactive piece. So we work with the COT team, we work with our transit community action teams, we work with our peace officers in the area, and we try to find that collaborative approach. But my main focus, my people's focus, is to make sure that we're doing that proactively and we're arresting people, we're finding targets, we're trying to do it logically. We have a dedicated analyst to our area, and we're in there every day. You would probably like the most sustained presence with Southgate as it stands here with Malmo Plains. I have transit terminals, I have buses, I have the whole line. So when I talk about that analyst piece, that's what I try to do. Try to do it logically. One of the most critical times for us to be there. But I can guarantee you when we are there, we are there. I know that west leg is very important. We try to do what we can. So I'll leave it at that. Maybe someone else can follow it. Yeah, so from my understanding is that we're going to try to get a 6 team, so additional 3. So we will have another 2 teams kind of onboarded here in May. With that, we have to find out where to find those bodies, right? Those people. So when the superintendent to the left of me talks about that, that's the growth piece and the attrition, the retirement. So we're on it. But none of what you said is lost on me, and there's some very challenging pieces to the terminal, and we're doing what we can to mitigate some of those circumstances. Yeah.
So, I appreciate your point of view on that for sure. So with the transit peace officers, we have the entire system to look at, but we do prioritize Southgate, especially lately. We've had a lot of SOPs, joint operations with EPS, the tracks teams, Southwest Division. It is a priority for us, Southgate especially, because we have seen the increases, but it is a broader social issue that brings all of this to transit and everywhere else, as everyone knows. So yeah, but we are hearing what you're saying for sure. Yeah. Yeah, so EPS, they take care of the more criminal elements, criminal code offenses. They also deal with bylaws, and they have the whole scope of authorities. When it comes to TPOs, we are restricted to provincial and municipal bylaws. And then criminal code offenses if we find committing in front of us. And then the security guards, they are just observe and report. That's the breakdown, the tiered system that we're working in.
And one of the things too, because it's hard to get to everybody, maybe I'll have people who want to talk come up and sit beside me, and then I can kind of give, who's first?
Hi, my name is Peggy. I live on 49 Avenue, very close to 111A Street. This is a bit of a change of focus, and I want to tell you my heart is breaking for the story we just heard from you, so I'm sorry to hear it. I'm in a position of probably great privilege. I own my own house. What I want to talk about is how the east end of Malmo is changing as a neighborhood. My block increasingly is bought by absentee landlords renting. What I observe is mostly foreign students, but other renters. The effect is a lack of neighborhood networking, knowing who else is on the street, people to go to, stuff like that. My question is about the change in, I've made a lot of household safety changes. My gates are now locked. I have an extra long deadbolt lock on my garage door. The frame is reinforced, et cetera, et cetera. The car is in the garage is closed, the car is locked. But what I want to know is about the changes in approaches to policing in that kind of situation, where we're really moving from a traditional neighborhood where people know each other, maybe bicycles get left in the backyard, to really much more of a downtown anonymous kind of community. And thoughts about making that transition in a neighborhood, because it's coming near the transit center. It's going to be rentals, and we're going to get multi-housing, no doubt, within the next decade or so with the bylaw changes. So thoughts on making that transition?
That's a good question. And you're talking about the transition or the transient people that are there rather than the people that have been living there for generations or even for a long time. So you're talking about more a sense of community or lack of community in your area?
Not transient people in the sense of homeless people wandering through,
right.
but temporary renters. And many are committed to the neighborhood. I'm not wanting to overgeneralize, but a lot are much less connected.
And I think you're not alone, and I've experienced it even where I live, a little bit lack of a sense. You should have the neighborhood block parties back, and I'm not sure if you guys still have them or some people have them, but they're probably more few and far between than they were before. And we used to have, especially when we had community officers, we'd have them attend those meetings, go to those meetings, be part of that. And then part of exactly what we're talking about here, we talk about within those meetings. Change of policing towards that, that's a really good question. I'm not sure if I have a great answer for you. Part of what we do is like we respond to calls. If it's because more calls because of that, well, we'll have more officers in there. We don't treat anybody different if they've been living there a long time, been living there a short time. We can't. That's not part of our job. Every situation is unique to its own, and every person we deal with is unique. And some people take longer to deal with, and some people it's just a popping by to say hello type of a thing. But I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to answer that question. I'm not sure what you're looking for me, but are we getting a different type of call? I don't know if that's essentially happening anymore, but I know for what I mentioned earlier, the primary driver of our response in your communities is property stuff, is more not, and it was mentioned about B&Es, not B&Es to homes, but B&Es to sheds, B&Es to garages, mischief to autos, theft from autos. A lot of crime of convenience, whereas a lot of the SEPTED and the crime prevention would help with that. So that's a big thing. That's probably the biggest driver in this area. But that comes from people coming here that probably don't live here as well too, and possibly and probably the LRT. It transports people. It has so many good things for the community, and it's a great thing to move people around and have people experience different parts of our community. So there's so many great things about it. But there's also some things that it brings with it too, and I think it takes collaboration of all of us to make it better. I know we're building our teams on there. I know we've had a lot of work with the TPOs and the city people, and they've been really good. We have balanced enforcement of trying to help the person. We'd always want to go to the enforcement, but you try and help them as best you can. But you're absolutely right. There has to be an enforcement piece. So there's some consequences to bad things that people do, of course, and that's where we have to come in and do that. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, ma'am. I'm not sure. Yeah, help me out. Sure. Help me out. I'm drowning.
Anytime. I would also just add to that in my experience, it takes a real concerted effort to build that sense of community again. And I think it's easy to overlook how much of that was lost during COVID when people just couldn't build community, when we couldn't be out in our neighborhoods with our friends and neighbors. So I would say maybe it's not under Keith's area, but we do have the neighborhood resource coordinators who, under their work, can help folks get connected to abundant communities and block parties and neighborhood connections and all of that great community building work that I think is really vital to reconnecting with your neighbors, getting to know who should be on your block, and then by default who should not be on your block. And doing some of those things that used to just happen naturally in communities. We do have folks in place that can help sort of navigate and get that kick started in your communities if that's something that folks are wanting to get engaged with as well.
So one thing I want to add to that is I actually just had my first person offer to organize a block party, and it's actually just kind of like the northeast corner of Malmo, so I'm very excited for that. Anybody else that's interested in organizing a block party, just email me. We've got funding.
The city does have small micro grants for block parties.
So both the community league's willing to pay, and then we're going to apply for whatever the city will give us and stuff like that. So money's not an issue. Just email me and we can figure that out. And I had something else.
You heard it from Trent.
Okay. Actually, I had specifically, I think you want to speak?
Okay, I'm going to preface this by saying that I'm young and I obviously don't know as much about the politics of things. I'm like only 19, I'm a uni student. But I do know that the way my friends and we all respond to crime on the LRT because we're so used to it that we don't bother to report it. So when stuff is happening, like I've been followed off, I know like when you get pictures taken of you or people start to follow you on the LRT, what you do is you go to a different station that's not beside your house and you take a bunch of bus transfers until you lose them. That's what we know to do. And like, we know it's bad because like those crimes are usually what gives them like they get braver and then they go after you more. But even like, I was just walking off the LRT and a guy came at us with a buck knife, but it took like, we were a group of 5 people, he still came, and it took all of them convincing us to actually call the police because we know they're so understaffed that we got placed on hold, and it's just a lot of pressure to actually go through and call the police, because I know people who do report it, like my friend, she got harassed, she got touched, she got followed. The first thing she was asked is, what were you wearing, right? So it's a stereotype, we don't appreciate it, but it's still part of like, this is the stories we hear from each other, right? So would it be possible to like implement an anonymous, like just to report a crime that happened without having to actually like be there and defend yourself and be like, no, this isn't like, no, I don't want to get this person in trouble. Like just some sort of thing to show the neighborhood where the crime is happening and like help your officers find spots where it's like repeatedly becoming a trend, or like just to help us avoid it versus having to go through all the trouble of like either just pretending it didn't happen or like actually going and doing the whole entire defend yourself kind of thing.
It pains me to hear you say that, and I have a daughter too, a university student, a young daughter. She goes, and I talk to her about transit safety and bus safety all the time too. Never put yourself feeling that you can't report it. You should always be able to report it. Don't ever think that you can't. There's a variety of different ways you can, and sometimes there's a lot of people don't feel comfortable coming to a police station and talking to one of us, and I understand that. We have different ways of doing. There's online reporting. You can phone in. We can have someone call you. If you've taken a picture, we can have pictures sent electronically if we need to. If you don't, a lot of people don't feel comfortable coming to see a uniform, and I appreciate that. Some of us are friendlier than others because that's the nature of the business. Some of us look friendly without bad mustaches. There's a variety of different ways. So I don't want you to ever think that you can't report, because you have no idea how important it is that you report stuff like that, and then when we make some change, or we either catch them or at least know where there's a trend so we can do something about it. It was mentioned about using analytics to drive where they work, and if we're seeing a lot of that happen in the area, then we know that we need to enforce it and proactively enforce it. So that's all helpful. So yeah, don't ever think that you're not supported, and I sure hope it's none of my police officers asking you those questions that you said, and if that's the case, then that's something that we have to deal with, because they should not be doing that. No one should. Because of who you are or what you're wearing makes no difference. There's no excuse for anybody to do that. So I want you to feel supported, and there's very different ways that we can do it, and we're trying to make our online reporting even more robust than it is, and we're looking at increasing the types of crimes that can be reported online, because we appreciate that, because the data is so important for us, and especially people that are in charge of branches. If we're going to proactively, intentionally direct where our people go on their free time, which is not a whole lot as much anymore, but we need to have that data. So I really encourage you and your friends. And with phones and with pictures and all that, do what you can. Did that help?
Yeah, sorry, I figured I'd clarify. I was just wondering, because there's the like report, don't watch things that are all over the LRT, everybody sees them. It helps slightly, because at least they pay attention, but they don't stop it. I just meant like, is there like a way that you could like put on some like link or QR code where people could scan it as they're like getting off something and then report it, versus like having to go through all the effort of calling, emailing in a website, because most people can't be bothered to do it if it's not happening to them.
Yeah, so for something that happens on LRT or transit, you can text the Transit Watch number, and it goes directly to our dispatch. You don't actually ever have to talk to anyone on the phone, and if you don't want anything done with it, at least it's captured, because we have had a lot of information sharing with EPS lately. So if that's your concern, is just to have it captured, that's a good way to do it. And you literally just text someone. If you're on the train, nobody even has to know you're talking to a dispatcher. Yeah.
I would just like to point this out, being not young, is that, I'll point this out, being not young, that she mentioned a QR code. We're looking at a generation that is not going to email. They're not going to phone. So from a change management standpoint, make it easy so that if she's had an incident she wants to report, she can do it as she's sitting on the LRT. That's how their life works. It is that fast. And I can't keep up with it either. But the reality is that's what they need, right? one summer, one of my managers asked me to sit in and help with seasonal hires. And one question we asked every one of the applicants was, were you ever in a dangerous situation, and how did you handle it? The boys talked about hockey, and I say boys because they were younger, and every one of the girls and young women talked about LRT and transit. So the difference in how each gender is harassed, and then you add minorities in there, and they're taunted on LRT and transit. And if it's not simple and seamless for them to report, your analytics are going to be wrong.
Yeah, and that is where the Transit Watch texting is helpful, because you don't actually have to look like you're calling someone. And yeah.
So just one thing I want to add on that too is that I've had a lot of residents who are frustrated when they do report crimes to the police, that it just feels like it goes nowhere. So one of the things that they really liked about having Constable Klein was that they had a kind of a personal contact. It's not just kind of going into the automated system and an officer who doesn't really maybe know the community, doesn't know the people. So it might be one kind of ideal thing. Like we had, I think, Leanna Bynes. She was actually the constable that reported to the break-in at Malmo Hall. Because one of the things even Mohammed had asked was having contact information. It'd be really nice to be able to have some police officers that we can kind of have that personal connection to, that we're inviting to block parties, have contact information to. I think residents would really like to kind of have that personal touch.
I'm from the Pleasant View Community League. I'm the community crime liaison there. And that was actually what I was going to ask about. Was I had the great fortune to have contact with Corrine Klein and Ann Wazelishin when they were part of your community engagement team. When they were disbanded and moved somewhere else, it was a great loss. And I'm just wondering, is there some replacement for that because this is what I'm hearing now, same as what I was feeling, is that we're a bit kind of abandoned by the EPS because we don't have that personal contact anymore.
Yeah, I hope you're not feeling abandoned. We haven't abandoned you, that's for sure. But our community engagement got absorbed when we looked at doing some 10 squad miles, so putting more resources to the front lines, because we realized that we weren't responding as quickly and as efficiently as we could from a frontline perspective. So we increased the growth of our frontline group to patrol. Some of our community engagement people will also use for a variety of different other projects. You look at the downtown HSOC project when we had those issues downtown. Some of those folks, we had a crime suppression team. They were supposed to take part of that role and have more of a centralized view of a citywide approach to community engagement and crime suppression. Again, those shortage of people, they pivoted to other areas to support other areas and support other functions that our chief was directed by the city and the province. I grew up in that, and I'll use that growing up in this service about having those community engagement people. And believe me, I would love to have the 5 or 6 people within my branch or any branch that can go out and be part of your community district liaisons. As part of the conversation we're going to have this week, I have a meeting with my management team and talk about how we can do that. If we can do that with our current resources. I'm not making any promises, but I know that's something that I would want in my community, and I can hear it's something that's probably that you want in the community. Is there ways we can do it with our current people? Potentially. Can I take a portion of their job if they're not responding to calls? But if they're not responding to calls, then it takes the other people within their squad that has to pick up the slack, for lack of a better term. We're talking a whole bunch of different things too. So some of those modified duties, people can't go on the street though. That's part of the problem, right? So they have accommodation due to injuries or whatever it is. We're looking at a variety of different stuff. They're great questions, and believe me, I feel it, because I want that too, because that was part of how I grew up in this, is being one of those community officers, and I really believe in it. So it's a focus for me. It's going to be a focus when I talk to my other superintendents in charge of patrol resources in here and the communities that they serve. That would be a big thing for me too in the community. So it's not lost on me. I'll promise you this, I'm looking into it. We're gonna try and do something about it, and it's gonna be a variety of different stuff from getting more people into service to hiring quicker, but we might have to pivot some of our own current resources. But when we pivot one thing, it affects another thing. There's always unintended consequences of that too, so it's a really good question.
I'm gonna get Mohammed first. He's just been staring me dead eyes.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming today. I'll introduce myself. My name is Mohammed Al-Zabi. So I'm the vice president of the Malmo Community League. So that's one hat I wear. The other hat is a U of A student. I just recently got my master's in immunology, and I'm still studying at the U of A, so for about 7 years now. So I take the LRT almost every day during the weekday. Often I come back late during the night, and I have crossed both sides of the overpasses at night, right? One thing I noticed though is like was mentioned, that a lot of these kind of, I guess you could say, delinquents like to stay on the west side, the west overpass. And what I noticed that is especially when conditions are cold outside or when things are hot outside, they like to stay in there compared to the other side because it's quiet, there's a lot of space, and they've got basically free air conditioning or a free furnace, right? So one thing I've mentioned before, and I mentioned, was to reduce like the amount of heat or air conditioning on that side of the overpass, because frankly it's just people are just passing through it. Most of the people actually staying in there are not actually waiting for vehicles. They're actually just like, I saw someone using a crack pipe on Thursday or Friday. So so they're basically hanging out, using drugs, and making it like a party room. Yeah, the pedway, the west pedway, just to clarify. So the response I got when I suggested about reducing the heat or air conditioning was that the elevator mechanics would be affected by doing that, but I heard that the elevator shafts can also be heated separately from the rest of the west overpass. So one thing I would definitely include in the approach is reducing the amount of heat or air conditioning on that side, just because you don't want to give a comfy place for people to be using drugs and a comfy place for people to camp and assault people, basically. So more like a proactive deterrence, and then less resources have to be used to respond to every call if less people are willing to stay there, if that makes sense.
So I do remember the conversation about the temperature and the heat in there. So currently it is set to +7 is the lowest set temperature that is in that space. And because of the electric and all of the other lines and things that run through that space, that is as low as they are able to set that temperature. So it is currently set to 7, and that is kind of the lowest set point that we're at.
I think in some buildings you're able to heat them separately, the shafts and the pedway. I don't know, I'm kind of like a geek with these kind of technology kind of things, so I look into these kind of things. But I'm not sure if that's the case with the overpass, but it might be a possibility for, I guess, the transit to look into to heat the shaft separately from the overpass, and then they'll provide more of a deterrence.
Well, I'm definitely not an elevator technician, but I do meet regularly with the maintenance folks for Southgate as part of this project, so I will float that past them next time we meet for sure.
Sure, thank you.
Hi, most of the Malmo people know me. I'm a big mouth, big complainer. This is thank you to the police for all you've done. We really, really appreciate it, and the trimming of the undergrowth and all that. It's fabulous. This is for 211 and 311 response. The other day, I'm going to give a brief background so you understand why I'm upset about it. I was on my way to work at 6 in the morning, went down the LRT to get onto the platform, and there was a little girl sitting there. She was about 17 years old, clean, native girl. She had on shorts, it was -10 that night, bare legs, no socks, and Crocs, sobbing her eyes out. So I asked her, can I help you? Because everybody are walking by her because we're used to horrific people that would probably stab you if you asked if they wanted help. She started bawling her eyes out and said, can you call 911? And I said, are you having an emergency? Do you need an ambulance? Are you okay? She just couldn't speak. She was crying. I said, can I just get you somewhere to go? And she said, yes. So I took her upstairs. There was a security guard there. I phoned 211. I was put on hold for an extended period of time. And security said to me, we put them on the number 9 and send them to the Herb Jameson Center, which is a men's shelter. This woman had clearly been assaulted at some point during the night. She had no telephone, no purse, and her clothes were missing. I'm not going to put her on a number 9 bus to go to a place full of homeless men. While I was sitting waiting for 211 to come, quite a few of these drug-using vagrants came by, and I had to shield her physically with my body as they walked around and saw fresh meat to traffic. So then I still have to get to work. I work in an operating room. Cases would have been canceled if I hadn't shown up. I was late for work, actually. I waited. And the security guard, I asked him if he could sit with her until the people came to take her somewhere safe. She goes, well, he said, I'm going off shift. I said, well, can you make the next shift be sure she gets help and gets on a vehicle to go to a women's shelter? He goes, I'll see what I can do. Then I went to work and I told people about this incident. 90% of the people I work with did not know what 211 was. Why is that? Forget the mural. Put a big sign up, 211. These are the services we provide, because they're incredible. If you go on the site for 211, the services they provide and the way they provide them are fabulous. They have women's shelters, they have addictions help, they have everything. They have youth emergency shelter, they have a place for intoxicated people to get shelter, and they will direct these people to the correct services. We need to get 211 information out to people. That's my 211 round. Now, for 311, I have reported graffiti in our neighborhood 1,000 times, and it's still there. I got my garage graffitied. 2 days later, I get a letter in the mail from the city saying $250 fine, or else we'll send you some resources to help clean it up. It's minus frickin' 20 out. I was out cleaning it when someone reported me at minus 20, and I get threatened with a $250 fine to clean up graffiti within 2 weeks, when this graffiti in our alley has been there for months. And the garbage cleanup. The homeless come in, make a big mess, and leave. We have coyotes running through our yards, eating garbage. The coyotes don't come when there's nothing to eat, but there's all this trash everywhere that I have phoned, photographed, and reported. Case closed. I keep getting case closed. It's been reported, been reported. It was there for a month, this one homeless encampment teardown. It's disgusting, absolutely disgusting. And this is not a police issue. This is a city issue for cleanliness and safety. And if we prevented people from ending up on the streets by helping them when they need the help, we wouldn't have to engage the police half as much. I mean, we watch, if anybody's seen the tents on the berm, I watched 2 women be trafficked all day long last summer. The women would go out dressed to the nines, come back with the crack for the men who were controlling them, be in there for half an hour, get their new makeup on, go out, sell themselves, come back with more drugs. We need to stop that. We need everybody to know how to do it and everybody to do it. Thank you.
That is a loaded discussion point. I don't know if anybody wants to take that. I agree. I think it's on.
I'm happy to talk about our in-camera response. So just to give you some context, in 2016 to 2017, we estimate there were about 600 to 700 encampments citywide. My team was the lead agency because most of those encampments were in parkland spaces, and that's what my rangers do. Last year, there were 9,300 complaints. This year, we are currently trending, we estimate we're going to finish the year around 16,000 complaints. And my team is incredibly busy right now with in-camera response. Our average response time is about 8.9 days. But the reality is that with the volume, and we've had no change in resources, by the way, I think it's worth emphasizing, that we're incredibly busy. We're trying to get to encampments as much as we can, but we have so many competing priorities. When you do file a complaint to 311, it's not that it's not being not addressed. And when you see duplicate complaint, that means somebody's already submitted that complaint beforehand, so that it's in our system, it's in our queue. Just refiling the complaint's not going to get it faster. We're scheduling site assessments, closures, and cleanups weeks in advance. And if we have to pivot and prioritize, that affects the scheduling down the line. And with that, that's resources, logistics, and response that we have to pivot and then reschedule everything afterwards. So with regards to encampments, the team is really busy. And so if you do have a priority complaint in relation to safety or the nature of the encampments complaint or change, so to speak, contact 311. If we have the time we can assess it, we will. One of the things that we look at is also geographical response. So if we're in an area, we'll also look at any of the surrounding area for complaints and then see if we can get those while we're within that respective area, as opposed to, assessing one high-risk site, then going to the north end, assessing another high-risk site, then coming back down here, because it's just not an efficient response for us. As far as the other issues with regards to Herb Jameson, from what I understand, the Herb Jameson, the Hope Mission and Herb Jameson used to be a men's-only facility, actually. From now, since the change, and they've opened up a 400-bed person shelter, it's actually open to the general public. That being said, I don't agree with the approach taken by the security guard. I can't speak to that, unfortunately. What I would like to say is thank you for doing what you did. I really appreciate it on behalf of all of us here. I think that when citizens take ownership in their community and they look after their fellow citizens, even the most vulnerable, it speaks volume about their character, but it also speaks volume about how much they care about their community. And that's really important as well. I'm not sure if there's, I'll turn it over to Keith here.
Yeah, just real quick on the 311. We continually work with 311 on scripting changes, and we've heard a lot from the community, even from our partners with EPS, where, listen, I report an encampment, all of a sudden it shows it's closed, like what's going on? Doesn't make a lot of sense. So we are working to try and make sure that we're communicating back, because generally what happens is when somebody complains, it goes into the complaint system. If there's a duplicate complaint, it will close it. That's still not providing you the right message that, by the way, we're already investigating this, what's the status of this? So we're working on some of those things as well. And from the graffiti perspective, that's a constant battle of trying to balance informing the property owner and also indicating that there are some consequences there as well. And we've heard loud and clear that sometimes our letters, our warning letters, are quite, what do you mean fine me $250 when somebody else has done this? But I think what we do is we also try to provide some of the information there for Capital City Cleanup that provides grants, that provides opportunities for vendors to come and remove that graffiti. So we'll always adjust those, and I appreciate you providing that information, and I'll be taking it forward to my team.
I just want to jump in a second on the 211. I got a loud voice, it's okay.
But for the recording.
Okay. I just want to jump in on the 211 thing. I really appreciate that being brought up into the space. That sounded like a tragic situation. And I'm going to actually pass it over to Katie to talk about the Community Outreach Transit Team, as I feel like that could have been a service that could be utilized in situations like that. But 211 is an amazing service. It is the Canadian Mental Health Association. They have any type of support service that you might need. We do market it quite a bit. If you have neighborhood resource guides, which I think Carrie, I think you handed most people out, but there's some here. And it kind of goes over any situation and what would happen in that situation, and then who you can call in that situation. So 211 is all over here. If you go online, it gives you specific categories that 211 will help you address individually or for someone else. So I really appreciate you bringing that into the space, and maybe there's more that we could do to promote it in those spaces so people know different options that they can call. But yeah, I'm going to pass it to Katie to talk about Oh, yes, sorry. My name is Jenna. I'm the supervisor of community safety with the City of Edmonton. So I oversee about 8 different safety initiatives. Neighborhood Empowerment Team is one of them. And COT I am involved with as well.
Thank you so much. So hi again, I'm Katie. I'm on the Community Outreach Transit Team. I cannot sing 211's praises high enough. They have been a very solid resource for me to even call in my working career. I think obviously it would be great to let people know more about it. I think the postering idea and stuff is a phenomenal idea. The community outreach team also has something similar for the service. I'm paired with a uniformed officer on shift, and our working times are from 6 a.m. to 2 a.m. 7 days a week. So we have 2 platoons and we're constantly working. The only dead spot is 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. I really think the situation that you had encountered in the transit system can kind of attest to situations that are happening every single day that are just as similar. Like, I think that event is likely to happen 1,000 times over. And what the community outreach transit team can do is we have vehicles that we have available where we can transport people to safe places. I can interfere in situations where I think somebody may be unsafe while I have my uniformed officer with me. It's a transit peace officer. And I can ask them kind of why they're spending the time in the transit center. And within a few days, I can get them ID. I can often get them connected to housing. I can get them into addictions treatments if that's what they so choose. But most important, my sole goal day to day is to make sure people are safe, whether it's little kids running around with their parents not around, or whether it's teenagers that have just been assaulted and are being surrounded by people that are less than savory on transit. In transit, there's big blue emergency buttons, and the word emergency is daunting to so many people, and we're looking into changing that. But there's big blue emergency buttons in every single transit center and every single bus station. And if you click the emergency button, it connects to our transit dispatch. And our transit dispatch often dispatches our team to calls such as there's people sleeping in the stairwell, or there's a young lady who is not wearing appropriate clothing for winter, which is something that I'm sure everyone sees a lot, people who are not prepared for winter and maybe are in a mental health crisis. And if you push that emergency button, or urge people who are vulnerable to push that button, which I try to do, we can often be dispatched right away as a call, and we can come and help that person right then, right there, and transport them if that's what they need to where they need to go. Women's shelters, men's shelters, beds in treatment if that's available. If I had a teenager the other day who had smoked a little bit too much weed and she needed to find her way home. She did not remember her address, so we managed to take the steps to drive her home, and that's all she needed. And that's, that was just keeping her safe in that moment. So I think there's a bunch of situations where my team could definitely be useful, and I definitely urge you to utilize us.
Thank you. I wanted to say we also have some water here, and there's washrooms around the corner to the left, because I know this meeting is getting a bit long, just have that in mind. So I believe Yusuf is next.
Hi everyone. I used to take the LRT from Southgate for about 1.5 years, and I just stopped. I couldn't do it anymore. I lost count of how many times I've come across people in the west entrance doing drugs, blocking the stairwell. How can you even get to the rest of the station if the stairwell is blocked? And many, many other problems. I was followed. I could go on and on. Someone mentioned earlier the mural. The only thing that would accomplish is beautifying the space, which I agree is much needed for the entirety of the station. But other than that, it doesn't improve safety. And I proposed, not just me actually, but in the spring community safety audit, we did a walk around, and there was a lot of support for making the elevator and the elevator shaft glass. And I was told that that's not feasible due to funding or lack of funding specifically. So why has the city not tried to get that funding? I know the city's doing their budget adjustment around this time of the year. There's a working group with the province. Why has the city not even tried to ask the province for funding for that? And I think that would actually beautify the space. You would no longer have concrete there. So that's my take on it. I would like to hear a response to that. I did discuss this with some city staff and my counselor. Sorry, I don't think the microphone is working. Okay, it's working now. So I discussed this with my counselor, and I was told that there's a balancing act with available funding, and bus service, more bus service might be a different, might be more important than that, possibly. So I felt dismissed, and I think a lot of people who supported that idea also feel dismissed. And I'm hearing agreement here. And then the second question is for law enforcement, so police, transit peace officers, the hired security, which I'm not sure is very useful based on what I've heard and even what I've seen. Although based on my interactions, they're great people, some of them. But what's the point of adding more cops and more officers if you're not going to crack down on people using drugs. And I know outreach has a role to play there, and that's appreciated. But I did watch the recording for the last transit safety update that the city council received, and only about 12% of people they responded to accepted help. So about 90% of people are not benefiting from that service. And that may be due to lack of decision-making capacity. When you're high on drugs and or have a mental illness, you can't think for yourself, you can't make the right decisions. It seems like police don't really want to arrest people, those kind of people, and they're continuing to cause problems. And I know we talk about like vagrants as one group, and I'm still trying to kind of understand the different groups of people involved, because there are homeless people being taken advantage of and have drug addictions, but at the same time, some of those people, and it's really hard for us to kind of see, like when you see a person, it's kind of hard to figure out which category they belong to. So are they the ones that are being taken advantage of? Are they taking advantage of other people, like was just mentioned in that story? Why is law enforcement not cracking down on those people? So those two questions, infrastructure and enforcement.
Well, that's a lot to unpack there, so thank you very much for your question. I can address the first one, and then I'll pass it over to our law enforcement folks. Just want to say, like, I definitely hear the concerns that people have when it comes to beautification efforts, and that's definitely something that you're not alone in feeling. We definitely hear that from all parts of the city. One of the things that we are trying to do is really take a holistic approach to this, and our transit system, part of it, what we are hearing from residents is we are doing surveys on what is making you feel safe, and cleaner spaces, and that does include beautification, does make people feel safer. So it's kind of a chicken and an egg thing, right? That isn't to say that the role of law enforcement isn't important, because it definitely is, and that we aren't doing a ton of other things, but we are trying to take a balanced approach to it. So I know that that is kind of what you've heard already, and it's definitely something we hear, though, with respect to funding. So do appreciate you sharing that, and I'll definitely be taking that back as well for some feedback.
So you're looking for the law enforcement side of the house. So it's a kind of a loaded question, but I'll try and give you an answer that's going to make a little bit of sense here. Over the years, especially with in the last few years, we've had balance enforcement is super important. Giving a person an opportunity to make an improvement, because we realized years ago just to kind of arrest yourself out of this. You just can't arrest yourself all the time and put people, because it's not making a long-term difference or benefit. So the balance enforcement is important, offering them opportunities for self-improvement before we go, I guess, to iron fist. But with that, a lot of our approach over the last few years was what our chief called off-ramping, or giving those people opportunities. That's the creation of all these programs we have to make it better for those folks. So we're not just throwing them in jail, which it's not doing them any benefit. It's not improving their life. It's not improving them for longevity. So we realized that. Have we, and I'll just point myself, have we gone to the point maybe we've gone too far that way? I guess you can argue that. But part of what we're doing right now is, part of our approach now is to have that. We have our partners, though, that are there to offer those supports. And you mentioned it. You can offer somebody the help and offer them the services, but it's up to them to take it. We can't force them to. The only thing we can force them, if they do a criminal offense, we have to arrest them or do something about that. Our safer public spaces now that we're doing is going to bring in kind of our orientation back for our members that, yeah, we're not going to walk past them anymore. We're not going to walk past and ignore it, because I think someone mentioned it too. It's almost like you see so much you accept it, maybe for lack of a better term. I'm not sure if it's ever been accepted, but you know what I'm trying to get at. And I think some of the officers we had with that too, and part of the frustration there, and I'll even say it is our justice system about keeping those people in there, because we can arrest them, spend all that time, they go in front of our justice system, and then the next day they're back out and we're dealing with them again. So you get frustrated as an officer, and I know I've been there myself too. So sometimes they just go, okay, why? Why are we doing that? Not the right approach, I understand that. You'll see the focus now being back on some of our members on that, because that's our chief's focus and that's our management's focus to our members, is not walk by anymore. We can't control what other people do, but we can control what we do. And we have to support our partners, absolutely, and the work of the balance enforcement being used, and that's super important. Because for our most vulnerable, arresting them every day is not doing what the benefit for them, and we realize that too. We're part of the solution, we're not the solution. But you'll see an improvement with that. It goes back to even what I mentioned earlier about the COVID time when we're training people, because it was that way. We weren't going out and doing as much anymore because there wasn't many people on the street, and our members were not having that personal touch. And you'll see more of it now. Part of our focus especially of our junior members and our membership on the street is to not walk by. We're not driving by anymore. We're going to deal with and intervene as much as we can. It may not just be an arrest them. It may be seizing whatever they're doing, getting them the service they need and moving on. Arresting and charging is not going to be, we're not going to solve that by doing that. But we have to disrupt the behavior. We can't leave them in the areas where they're causing issues to people, and that's going to be a focus, disrupting the behavior.
So I wanted to add to that too.
Yeah.
I talked to the head of mental health and addictions for Edmonton, I believe it's Mark, and one of the things he talked about is that there's no laws for compulsory arrests of addictions or anything like that, or mental health as well. Basically, my understanding is what he told me is that if that person is at acute risk of harming somebody else or themselves, then the police can arrest them. But then it's basically they take them to, I'm not sure if it's the hospital or something like that, but then the hospital can decide at that point whether they want to accept them or not. And then there's a review board that reviews the hospital's decision whether they're going to accept them or not. So there's basically no compulsory laws to kind of force these people into it. So it's not really a police kind of perspective, it's more so a legislative perspective.
So something to think about, in other countries around the world, governments are able to jail political opponents for years, decades, and make them disappear. So surely, if it's an extreme example, but surely if they are able to unjustly imprison people, we can crack down on people that are actually causing harm in this society.
We have one part to play. We have one part to play, but we have, like you talked about, the legal system has their part to play as well. You bet.
I think the piece that you're missing is that these are our boots on the ground. Our federal government and our provincial government make the criminal laws that need to be followed. We have a huge mental health and addictions crisis in our country that is not being dealt with at all. And then we go and we ask everybody from city council to the police to the outreach people to enforce laws that don't exist, to handle addictions and mental health crisis, and then they have no resources to do it. Talk about health.
So
So just a second.
Yeah.
They take them to the hospital. They should be admitted. They don't have a bed, so they let them go. So, these are our boots on the ground. This is as good as it gets, guys. Unless we attack the root cause. No, I'm saying this is great. But the root cause is at the federal and the provincial level. And unless we deal with the addictions and mental health crisis and the fact that we just let people go because we don't have spaces in jail, so we put them in jail, they go through detox immediately. Well, that didn't help. But there's no rehab bed for them.
We've also made the decision not to act on certain laws.
Exactly.
So there's a loitering bylaw that we're not acting on, and that's well within the scope of the city's control.
But
So
is that a good use of our time?
I guess we're going to have to agree to disagree on that. I can tell you that my need to be safe and the need of my children to be safe surpasses any concern that I have about any person that is engaged in drug use or other activity on the LRT.
So just 1 second, guys. We're kind of breaking off into individual discussions and stuff like that, and I totally agree. I did invite our MLA and I did invite our MP. Our MP unfortunately wasn't able to make it, and I didn't hear back from our MLA. So, it is a legislative issue. One thing I want to bring up before everybody kind of checks out or leaves is tonight, I want to say thank you to Southgate Baptist Church for hosting this event. They did this at no charge, and we've even got Setri in the back recording it to my YouTube channel, which I'm very grateful for. And then number two, we actually have a community jam night actually hosted at Holy Spirit Lutheran Church, a block down. Everybody's welcome, no cost to it. If you want to perform, great. If you don't. We got food and stuff like that. So just wanted to give everybody the invite to that. You guys are all welcome as well. It's got 180 people venue, so it's good. But yeah, so just want to lighten it up a bit. I'll let Yusuf finish.
So I don't want to drag this out forever because we could talk about this for hours, but I will say the options for dealing with this drug addiction crisis, not drug poisoning, because that's just the symptom of it. The mayor says drug poisonings all the time. That is a problem, but that doesn't affect the safety of non-drug users so much. So I would say drug addiction and all the problems that come with it are the problem. So the options have to be either treatment, or you just, if you can't stay sober, you have to go to jail. And on the elevator question, I didn't really get an answer to that. Why haven't there been efforts to get funding for that? Why has the city not tried?
What's that? Oh, does he pay taxes? I don't think so. Okay. Did you want to answer that, Carrie?
We were just regrouping here to familiarize ourselves with the answer to that question. And I believe we did get some quotes internally for that, and the cost was extraordinary. We can loop back definitely though and have that discussion internally, and maybe we can get your contact information. But yeah, that's something we're looking at across multiple different stations as well, and it's something that we've heard is helping with visibility and sightlines. So, of clear elevators? Yes, yes.
I'd like to begin by saying you are very welcome in Southwest Edmonton, and a big cheer for the blue, for the agencies represented here, one and all. We are so happy that you have come to our neighborhoods, because this larger geography from Malmo, but also Lendrum, Park Allen, Pleasant View, north to the river, we are in an area where we're really far from a police station. And I do remember the wonderful Westbrook storefront, community, neighborhood policing station, and the good work that happened there. And I strongly support a return to that approach. I think it was excellent. And I'm happy to say that right in front of my city councillor who's here today listening. I also support resources for the park rangers who are doing such an excellent job. I think there are only 4 of them assigned to encampment duty across the city on 2 shifts. That makes 2 people per day. My goodness, they are working so hard, and it's almost futile to think about the capacity and the demand, because there just isn't enough capacity. And I hear what the EPS is trying to do, rolling out more recruits, and it's so important. So let me just come to the reason why I'm here. More specifically, robbery in my neighborhood escalated during an illegal encampment that was in the woods, south of the LRT tracks, north of the Lendrum Mennonite Church. It was there for approximately 3 weeks. People called it in, reported. Meanwhile, robberies continued every time it got dark. Ultimately, the individuals in that camp, one of them was arrested thanks to citizen assistance and the support of EPS. It was someone considered dangerous and wanted on outstanding warrants. This is who was living in our back alley for 3 weeks down the road. And I was particularly concerned because it was only 20 meters from an old age care home where they were also looking in the windows during the night shift. So that was another point of vulnerability I think needs to get on the map here. In addition, incidents were happening on the University South Campus precinct. On that South Campus, we were watching people who were suspicious, living in the bush, carrying away property. There was a massive hoarding stash. You can observe all of these things when you do move around your neighborhood. And what I noticed is needed is coordination between the agencies so that we can share the data points. And I really support the use of analytics and coordination between these agencies. And in addition to your services, I would highly recommend adding the University of Alberta Protective Services peace officers, and I know that's part of the puzzle and you work together. So in this particular area of Edmonton, we do have an interjurisdictional landscape, obviously, but it involves LRT. It involves 2 university campuses, 3 if you count Campus Saint-Jean. I think we do need to tie in better. From a citizen perspective, it took too long to get a response to the encampment, and the fact is it was tied to crime, ultimately. We did tie that up. it's very difficult for citizens to know what's going on. We need to have the programs that you can plug into our neighborhoods, and we welcome the NET program. I'd like to hear more about Neighborhood Watch as well. But I'd also value a briefing on exactly what is happening with a more granular mapping, neighborhood to neighborhood, so that we understand what is going on in our hoods, and people can come together and be briefed by those who know what is happening, and we can work together. So I think all of that is really important, and I would just throw my support to EPS and the park rangers in particular. And park rangers have to do good work for conservation at the same time as now fighting encampments and servicing the human needs. So I'm also concerned that our parks and recreation spaces may be falling behind because we don't have enough park rangers. And I think you used to have, 14, and now there are 12. So there's need to add to those budgets for the park rangers. And especially return to the community policing approach. You have lots of support there. Thank you for coming today.
I also want to add on to that. It'd be nice to have some historical reporting as well, because the community map, it doesn't necessarily give me, like, I want to look back 5-10 years, see what's happening in trends and stuff like that. So kind of more open access to the data would be very appreciated as well.
Yeah, because I think what you get 180 days, the last 180 days is the most up to date. Can I comment on your university liaison there? We have a university liaison constable from Southwest Division embedded in protective services. He's doing some great work with them, really supported by them, so we have that. So there's a liaison back to my branch of the work that he does. He's kind of embedded with our beat team on Strathcona, and they share that information quite regularly, meetings weekly. I'm engaged, we're engaged with the Director of Protective Services of the university. We have monthly meetings with him to see how things are going, and our phone's always open if something's happening there. So there's a communication line there for sure, and we're building that. And I know Dan, my officer there, is doing some great work. He's typically very, very busy and super supported by the university. So that's a good thing there. I just want to make sure you're aware of that too.
Did anybody else want to comment on this? Okay, do you got a microphone over there?
Yeah, I'll just add really
first?
quickly. With respect to your joint analytics comment, that is one of the pillars actually that we have. Last year in February, the city council passed what's known as the Enhanced Transit Safety Plan, and we have 4 pillars of work that we're organizing underneath that, and one of them definitely is integration, and we actually have exactly that, a joint analytics working group that includes representatives from internal to the city as well as EPS and our social agencies, and we're really working through what the challenges are between us having different definitions of our data points as well. And there are definitely privacy concerns with us sharing cross-organizationally, and we're working through those things as well. So it's something that we are definitely prioritizing and definitely working on the back end.
Thank you for the comments, especially about more park rangers. I always appreciate that. We do actually map all of our encampment complaints citywide. So if you were to look at a map, though, basically what you're seeing is thousands upon thousands of dots across the city. It's not going to really tell you that much. But those complaints come in. As far as our assessment goes, it's two-tiered. So we'll look at it from a risk-based approach. We use a risk matrix to evaluate, is it a housing-focused response or a prioritized closure? And we look at the prioritized closure, we look at the factors of crime, fire safety, impact to the residents, also impact to the residents who are actually staying in the encampment, biohazardous factors, and then from there we try and prioritize the closure if it's a high-risk assessment. However, the challenge we have, like I said earlier, is that the number and the volume of encampments is exceeded anything we've expected or predicted for the year. Again, 2016, 600 to 700, last year 9,300, and we're going to break 16,000 complaints. Out of that, we estimate probably about 2/3 are duplicate. So that means there's around 6,000 complaints my officers are responsible for, which creates a ratio of 1 officer for about 1,000 investigations or site inspections, which is one of the highest in our branch. As far as the issues around response times, again, we'll try and get there to do that assessment, but the actual closure could take a little bit longer than that. And that's based off of several factors. If it's a housing-focused response, we'll look at engaging the agencies that are partnering with the city, which is Hope Mission, Bissell, Boyle Street, and try and get those people the help they need. and see if they can get into shelters and support and potentially into the housing stream. And that can take anywhere from 26 to 45 days. As far as closures go, from the assessment, our initial response time went from about 3 days to now to about 6 days to as high as 16 days. That's for an actual assessment for my team to go there and look at it, make the assessment, and then prioritize the closure on top of that with our operations team. We partner up with the Edmonton Police Service. It's known as the High Risk Encampment Response Team. And all sites or all complaints that come in go through initial assessment by that team, and then they determine if it's going to be a housing-focused response or a prioritized closure. We do share data with the Edmonton Police Service. Recently, as Keith mentioned, we've been working with 311 to try and streamline some of the processes. One of the challenges we have with the city is that we have different silos within organizations of the city, and our systems don't necessarily talk to each other. So for encampment response, including 311, we estimate there are as many as 6 different systems that don't share data that we actually have to do a manual entry. All the processing for an encampment complaint is done by my officers. They spend approximately 2 hours per day in the office just sorting out the files, prioritizing investigations, prioritizing closures, doing the mapping, and then liaising with Edmonton Police Service on what sites are going to prioritize for the day, in addition to getting the closure teams coordinated for a site closure as well. One of the challenges we realized recently, Keith actually got us all together in a room after a citizen complained about the way 311 complaints are being triaged. We learned that some of the information between us and the Edmonton Police Service is not necessarily being shared, and we're working on that right now. So when a complaint comes to us, if there is an immediate public safety concern, that citizen is directed to the Edmonton Police Service. However, that information will still come to us, and then we'll use our partnership with the 2 EPS members on our high-risk encampment team to make sure that we're aware of it so that the peace officers are not going into a dangerous situation and they're going to have that Edmonton Police support. As Fred said, we do have some limitations under the Peace Officer Act, the expectations by the province as to what we can engage in and what we cannot engage in. And that's actually very limiting as far as getting involved in criminal investigations or criminal elements in occupational health and safety. If we know there's a weapons scenario in there, or there's an issue with major drugs or crime or so forth, we actually have to direct that to the Edmonton Police Service first, and then we use our partnership with the High Risk Encampment Response Team to help us with the prioritized closure.
Thank you. And I also want to echo on the comments of just thank you everybody for coming and doing this talk. I really appreciate it. I think the residents really appreciate it too, getting to have some direct contact with people. So thank you.
Hi everyone, my name's Amit Bavsar. I'm the Lendrum president. So I just want to thank Trent for organizing this and inviting us here, because I do think that these neighborhoods we're not onto our own, right? It's all connected. So thank you. And I just wanted to follow up a little bit on that, because I have talked with Pearl Ann about this, and what I want to talk about is maybe a slightly different perspective, which it has to do with the encampments, and it has to do with the communication you were talking about. So I was really happy to hear you say you want people to report, and that's what I've been advocating to our neighbors. But I've had a lot of neighbors express frustration that they know that their material, that is their property that has been stolen, is now in an encampment around the corner from where they are. They can see it. And I would love to hear, like concrete, that EPS has access to the 311 reports that the neighbors are making, saying there's an encampment here, because that can obviously, with the data analytics, tie into potentially a place to investigate the recovery of stolen property. We've seen when these things get broken down that there are huge, mostly bike chop shops, but also tools. And so it's very frustrating when it takes a while that our stuff is sitting there, we can't get it. I personally have had stuff in here. But I would also like to point out that when we had an encampment, the one that Pearl Ann was talking about, that encampment was scheduled for closure for a few weeks, and we were aware of the date, and it got closed overnight. It got closed overnight, not because of the fires that we reported, but because the police were able to get involved, because there was criminal activity in there. And then the authority was there, and it could be shut down, and a bunch of stuff was recovered, and that was great. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, I do sympathize with the fact that we need more park rangers. I want to express the frustration of residents that it takes so long, and we would love to empower you through Councillor Jans to try to get more supports, but I would love to hear is there communications, because you just alluded to this, between the police for when we report thefts, that they can see where these encampments are, the frequency that they've been reported, so that potentially they can go investigate there, because we do know we can recover property there. Thank you.
So as I alluded to earlier, we recognize there might be a few gaps in between the information we're sharing from the Edmonton Police Service, as well as, again, our restrictions with the Solicitor General and what we're technically supposed to get involved in, not supposed to get involved in. So we'll have the initial complaint, and as new information comes in, it'll be assessed. And if there's anything there, then we'll use our partnership with the EPS members of the high-risk encampment team to inform them of the escalating scenario involved with potentially stolen property or any further additional impacts, to potentially see if they can direct the area resources or the local division to go in there and attend and prioritize the closure. But it is a bit of a challenge because, again, we have different databases that don't talk, not to mention the fact that we don't have access to EPS systems. So our high-risk encampment response team members have access to EPS systems, but my peace officers don't have that level of access, unfortunately. And that's something that's basically just governmental. We're not going to get that level of access. So we focus on basically prioritizing the closure, and then we let the EPS basically handle the criminal matters associated with the encampment. So I'm not sure if that kind of answers your question, sure?
I'm thinking more about the communication. Does EPS have access to your data to know where the encampments are?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Like I said, we have members now. So there are 6 EPS members dedicated to the high-risk encampment response team. And for a point of clarification, I currently have 6 right now. But what we are looking at doing in recognition of the volume is that we're now in the planning stages of a second encampment response team. However, that's going to come at the expense of other peace officer services in our branch. What we do know now is that our numbers are not sustainable. I have some very, very tired officers right now. And so with that, we're going to be, we're just in the final stages of approval of looking at supplementing encampment response for 14 other peace officers from various areas within our branch. However, to do that, we actually have to cut services in those respective areas. So for the park rangers, one of the considerations is that we do typically work till midnight, and I have 2 officers on for the entire city for midnight, but we might have to cut services at 6 o'clock and scale back what we're able to respond to just because of the sheer volume of encampment complaints that we're dealing with right now. We do share the information with the Edmonton Police Service as much as we can, respectively, and then one of the other challenges we have with stolen property is that we don't have access to the stolen property database that the Edmonton Police Service does, but there are systems online where we can check and see if that information is there. One of the challenges we have, though, is that reporting. So a lot of times when we're seeing things like bikes in encampments, bikes are like currency, by the way, in encampments. They are incredibly popular. It's a form of currency for them, and that's why you see them in there. But we're not necessarily getting that information. And I'm not necessarily sure if I can speak to the Edmonton Police Service. When they're there, they'll deal with the issues of things like identification. If there's anything there that looks like it might not belong, they might try and check it across their stolen property database and determine if it's there's an owner for it, and then they can make that assessment about potentially returning it. And we have seen that on occasions. We have closed a couple of encampments. There was a $14,000 electric bike that was found in one, and we kind of made the assumption it probably didn't belong to anybody in the encampment. And then the Edmonton Police Service was able to find the owner and relocate it.
That's great. I just want to reiterate, I guess, because I didn't say it and I meant to, is that with the frustration comes a sense of ground roots, empowerment, and potential for confrontation, potential for vigilantism. And I've tried very hard to, tamp that down, but it is hard when people know where their stuff is and they just don't see action happening. So, I mean, what are the strategies that we can use? This is the different side of it. How do we prevent, maybe overreaction? Because we want safety, right? We do, and we understand it's nuanced, but people are frustrated.
Oh, that's very understandable. I think, in my time in this position, one of the things I've learned is that, especially where an encampment's popped up in a community, they typically don't see it. It's very completely unnerving. And then you start to see some of the issues associated with that, loss of property and some of the stolen property, so to speak, and we definitely understand that. I can never condone that kind of behavior for a lot of reasons, but first and foremost for public safety. You don't know who that person is, the level of desperation they might be feeling. In some cases, your stolen property might be the only thing that gets them fed for the next 7 days, and they're willing to fight to whatever effort they can to potentially prevent you from taking that for them. There is a level of vulnerability with some of these people that are dealing with, and they're dealing with scenarios that I think a lot of us probably potentially don't understand. And they live a completely different life, I think, that we probably don't understand and we're never going to understand unless you actually go live that and recognize the desperation with some of these folks. So if there is an issue there, I mean, I'm encouraging you to be patient as much as can. Again, we are making some service adjustments that are going to try and get us to within that 3 to 5 days assessment, and then hopefully prioritize closure a couple days after that. It's going to be our new service standard with the addition of the officers. But again, it's going to come at the expense of other services, unfortunately. But this is, because of the volume now, these are the approaches we're going to have to take. And again, I don't think even, even in our predictions and kind of our analytics and mapping and so forth, and we work with social development and the number of people falling into homelessness, we didn't anticipate 15 to 16,000 complaints this year. We thought maybe 10 to 11,000 complaints, which is still a lot. When you look at, 7 or 8 years ago, we were looking at 600 to 700. But the other aspect of that is that because of our processes and everything that we've developed, my team is now responsible for encampment citywide. So we're in the downtown core. We work with the Healthy Streets Operations Center, which is an EPS-led initiative for public safety. They deal with some of the encampments downtown, but my team has now become the lead agency for encampment response. And like I said, we're incredibly busy right now, sir.
I would also, for the recovery of stolen property, I would just encourage everyone to make sure that you are writing down serial numbers of your property. It's one thing that EPS recovers property and you may know it's yours, but unless you have those serial numbers or photos or descriptors written down, it's really tricky to actually get your property back. Particularly, like Troy said, bikes are very common in encampments. And there is a bike index that exists where you can specifically register your serial number of your bike with photos so that it is recovered. EPS can check that bike index quite easily and make sure and get that property back to you in the most efficient way that they can.
Thank you. So, do you want to go?
So appreciate the conversation around information sharing. So just a couple quick things so we're within the city, we're trying to work on integrating our dispatch. So transit, city operations, our peace officers, our municipal enforcement, and sort of collaborate on information sharing internally to begin with. Then there's a larger project working with EPS, fire, on an integrated dispatch project for the greater, for Edmonton itself, like cross associate regional and that stuff. So hopefully those will, and I do know that we are significantly making progress on that information sharing. It's not an easy thing. I think we've pointed it out here that there's certain information that can't be shared because of the authorities and jurisdictions, but we're doing our best to try and open up some of those avenues. So we're really working hard with EPS on trying to make sure we do those. Just wanted to make sure people are aware of that as well.
Okay, we're coming up on 4 o'clock, so I'm going to limit to these last 2 questions, and if we can try and do it in the time limit.
Hello, my name is Anita. I know this isn't a popular question, but I feel it has to be raised. And thank you to everybody. This is a complex, and the challenges that all of you are facing and trying to support our communities, it's really appreciated. I guess the question is relating back to the transit and the safety. I can't help but feel that part of the problem is that there's such easy egress via the LRT for whoever to go wherever they want to. And it's wide open. I've done a fair bit of traveling, and when I go to bigger centers that are in the population base that Edmonton is aspiring to grow to, like Toronto, London, New York, any major city, there's pay gates. You don't get access to the train stations or the LRT stations unless you're a paid customer. And I know it doesn't eliminate the problem, but I guess I just wonder whether that was considered. Are there hot spots in the city that would benefit from having those gates that might decrease the volume of some of these people on the LRT that are using it for unsavory purposes, for lack of a better way to say that. Has that been considered as part of the use of the grant? Or even in the scheme of things? And I'm not saying everywhere, but just places where it seems that there's a concentration of activity that, would it impact it? I don't know.
Definitely. Thank you so much for that question. It's interesting that you raise it because it's been kind of on the books for us for years and years and years, talking about it, going back and forth. And I'd have to dig it up, but I know that there was some research done out of the city of Calgary a few years ago, don't quote me on the year, that determined that fare gates weren't going to make an impact on safety, that it would just kind of, people would jump over them still. And that is something that we actually have affirmed in the research as well from other major municipalities. So in terms of the cost-benefit analysis, it was something that, at least at that time, determined was not something we would explore. That isn't to say in the future, I have no idea. Research is always evolving, but at this time, we didn't have support for it. But it is definitely part of the conversation and something that we get asked constantly. Yeah, and there definitely are some still within the system that aren't even in operation, right? Yeah.
Okay, last question.
Well, my name is Diana. I'm just a humble kind of a Malmo resident. Two comments that I want to make. The first one being, because a while ago a friend here mentioned that, well, our city's kind of mental health and drug kind of difficulties, like, and then he talked about, how we have to really focus or use the law enforcement kind of system. I worked in the mental health and addiction system for about 20-something years. And I think you all know that, well, in all these last 2 decades or what, the mental health problem is a very complex problem. And because I work in that system, for a long time, we have been involving, because I work in the mental health clinic, and then there, for about 10 years, we now have a peace officer always stationed in our clinic. And also, if you know about the access 24/7, we have a whole team involving not only mental health therapists, but also police. Whenever there is some crisis, mental health crisis in the community, we'll be involved, immediately that there would be a team of mental health therapists, and also I think police even, they come out and then go to the home to help, support. So I just think that, well, we should not really just, and we know, and I really appreciate when I first came here and I see, all this team of, all these people, and I have a basic belief that, well, everyone really try your best. We are not, putting any blame on any of them, here. And I also appreciate, Trent, also, well, he has that charisma or whatever that, well, he was able to invite all of you, to come here and all that. And I really show appreciation. So the first point I want to make is that, well, I don't really know, whether the police officer here, whenever or under your team, when you work under, or when you work around Southgate Mall or on this area, would you be very easy, easily call upon some mental health people, or would you even just, in general, that you work as a team, that you're able to involve them, because we are really working with a very different community people here, especially we talk about drug and addiction and all these, and crime, and it's really very connected. This is one point, the first point. The second point I want to make is, we talk enough about the mural, and to be honest, I have been very angry and upset in the last few years. The city has sent us, a letter saying that, well, we have to beautify, our area and then change the lamps and whatever. But then I thought that, well, the lamps are very good, they're working. So why do we have to do all this beautifying? Whereas, why don't we spend more money onto helping the helpless or the homeless or, all these more important kind of people. So that's the second point I want to make. Thank you.
I can probably
Thank you.
address a little bit at your first about your mental health aspect of it. We have our police and crisis teams that deploy. So if one of my members, my patrol members, deals with a person in the community here that substantive mental health issue, or they recognize a potential mental health issue with the person, we can get our PAC team out there to give them a hand. And we understand too the other accesses we have within the city. If we need some mental health practitioners to come and help us, you betcha. It's a big part of what we do, and we recognize it's a huge issue in the city for sure. So I definitely can say that we're very much aware of the ability of us to access those resources.
Anybody else want to comment?
Hello, everyone. As you can see in this audience, I'm the only black person who is here. One of the things that I want to mention is my late father was a lawyer. I grew up in a very middle-class neighborhood. I lived in Malmo. And one of the things that I don't hear, and I have not heard today, is the idea that we really need to have some compassion. I know it's not a popular thing at this point. People think in terms of, I've worked hard all my life, and I don't want somebody coming and taking my thing, or the things that I have worked for. You know, think of when somebody is in prison and they get out of prison. They already have a record. How easy is it for them to find the supports, the housing? Where is their hope? Many of these people that we see, and get a job, of course, yes. Many of these people that we see do not choose, whether it's addiction, whether it's homelessness. I think all of us who are doing so well need to consider that as we are talking about removing heat, removing comfort in a shelter that is for a bus, not a home. We need to think of that. And each one of us has a role to play. And I've sat here very patiently, listening to so much of what is said about how we need to protect, protect, protect. The police are wonderful, yes. But the police are not the only solution. And in fact, when we hire more and more and more police, it means we're putting money into the hands of more middle class potentially, and increasing the gap between the have and the have not, the hope and the hopelessness. So I'd like everyone here, please, as you think of all your things that you have had taken from you, think that at least you had those things. And there's so many people who have no hope. We need to give people hope. And we need to be a bit more compassionate.
Does anybody want to comment on that? Are we good? So I want to thank everybody for showing up. Anybody that grabbed a glass of water, if you could pick it up and kind of bring it back over here, just so nobody kind of kicks it over or breaks it, stuff like that. But thank you guys, and I'm
Trent,
going to stay
sorry,
around.
I'll just add, if there are folks who didn't get an opportunity to ask a question, please feel free to fill out those forms, leave us your contact information, and you can leave them on our table over here. My business cards are over there as well. Please feel free to reach out, and if you leave a question, we will get back to you.
Thank you.